Okay, hi everyone. I hope you're tuning in on our YouTube channel or on our Bay Area Reporter Facebook channel. Welcome to our third in a series of events that I'm producing for the Bay Area Reporter to celebrate our 50th anniversary. Tonight's talk is B.A.R Talks 3, AIDS and HIV in Print, with veteran AIDS reporter Liz Highleyman, the creator of the Obituary Project, Tom Burtch, and notable florist Guy Clark, who is also one of the subjects referenced in the David Weissman film, We Were There. So I just want to welcome everyone. Say hi.
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 And I'll keep an eye open on our chat window. If folks have any questions or comments, you're welcome to, if you are able to find the chat window, please feel free to do that. You should be viewing this now on our Facebook channel or on our YouTube channel, which you should subscribe to. It's youtube.com/C/Bay Area Reporter SF. And that'll be archived there along with our other previous two chats. So I just want to start with the folks and say, when was the first time you heard about AIDS, and when was the next time perhaps that you saw the Bay Area Reporter an article about it? Let me start with Guy, because you've been here like what, 50 years?
Yes.
Guy,
yes.
Can you talk about
yes.
the first? Do you remember the first experience of hearing about AIDS or finding out about it?
I think the first experience I had was, I think it was that drugstore on the corner of 18th and Castro. They just had a couple pictures of people who had contacted AIDS, and they were asking, what is this? What's going on here? You know, and I was so disturbed. The paper was the B.A.R, and you just had to get the B.A.R paper and start reading.
So strangely, one of the first editorials referencing this new illness before it was even diagnosed as KS or Kaposi sarcoma was actually kind of dismissive. That it was just probably another sexually transmitted disease. There was no cause for alarm. Of course, that switched pretty quickly. I don't know, Guy, if you remember reading about specific diseases or deaths in the Bay Area Reporter, or do you remember when that happened?
I thought it was in the, well, I think I was in it around the early 80s. The early 80s, you know, we just, you know, some friends were getting sick, and, you know, we were sharing our information.
It's interesting. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, we were sharing our information, and none of us had a clue, because there was no cure. People were like guinea pigs, you know. We were desperate to try something, but, you know, trying it might just take your life out, and it did in a lot of cases.
Yeah, there were a lot of unusual alternative methods before AZT, right?
Yes, yes.
Some of them were kind of toxic.
A lot of them were toxic, you know. It was just an experimental, you know, endeavor.
Tom, can you talk about when did you come to the Bay Area?
I came in '85, and my first real slap in the face, if you will, about AIDS came very early on when I joined the Gay Men's Chorus. So when I joined the Gay Men's Chorus in '84, they had 7 people who had died. And I think within a week of my joining the chorus, we had a memorial service that I was singing at. We'll probably get into my contributions to this obituary thing a little bit later on, but it wasn't so much reading about it, it was living it. And it's kind of what Guy was saying. Nobody knew what was going on. People were dying.
Yeah. Liz, can you talk about your early days of, you said you've been writing about AIDS and HIV for 30 years. What was your first impressions reading it in other media, or where were you in the early 80s?
Well, in the early 80s, I was in college in Rochester, New York, and I probably wasn't very much aware of HIV or AIDS then, except hearing it. I moved to Boston in '85, and I got involved in ACT UP Boston in I think '87 or the year after, because people in my LGBT community were starting to die of it, and so I got involved in AIDS activism, and I was actually a computer scientist in college, but I took an interest in the science of AIDS and educated myself about that. I went to public health school to learn more, and I moved to San Francisco in 1994 and got a job with the San Francisco AIDS Foundation on the editorial staff of their publication called Beta, which is their HIV treatment publication. So we covered there, the start of, the approval of AZT, and then not very long after the discovery that it didn't really work long term, and then it had a lot of side effects. And then I was there through the discovery of the B.A.R drugs in 1996. And I happened to be at the conference, the International AIDS Conference in Vancouver in 1996, and you can see the purple poster for it behind me. And I hadn't gone as a journalist per se, but things were interesting. So I sent an email out of the blue to Mike Salinas, who was the editor at the time, and he said sure. So I sent him an article about the conference and the associated activism. At the time, we had to run to the 24-hour photo developing place and then run to the FedEx office and send in the hard copy photos. But that worked out, and I've been writing for B.A.R about HIV and other things ever since.
That's pretty amazing. We have a little parallel in that I first heard about AIDS in the student newspaper at Ohio State University. I didn't read other newspapers. I would read Christopher Street. So I got the gay media from the used bookstore, and it seemed very far away. It was not a concern. So until the end of college, I lived in Pittsburgh for a year, and then as soon as I moved to New York, it was start using rubbers. Condoms became a thing by geography, which of course was stupid, but I'm still HIV negative, so maybe it wasn't. But we really thought it was over there. The irony is that working in New York with Out Week and ACT UP led to me being hyper informed about not only the queer community, but HIV, and having many friends in ACT UP New York who got sick, who died, who survived, who endured protests, etc. That's not my life story. But it led me to the Bay Area Reporter, because when I came here to visit, I went around, I was visiting and doing a press trip for another event, and brought resumes, and the Guardian said, well, we have internships. And I said, well, I have 2 advocate cover features. So, and the Bay Area Reporter was the only one that hired me. I had been freelancing for every paper out in California, and it became my new job that led me out here, and I sublet my apartment, blah, blah, blah. But one of the first things I did, the point, is that I had to edit the obituaries. And we'll show photos very soon. We'll go through slides and images from the paper and that everyone can talk about. But one of the hardest things was that most of them were handwritten. They were written within days of the person's death, probably by the roommate or the partner or the life partner or the boyfriend. They often forgot to mention themselves, and they were in the midst of probably having a biological family coming in and swooping in and taking all the stuff. So there was a photo that maybe, we had to make do with whatever photo was sent, because it was very, I had guys in tears. I had to call men, mostly men, who were absolutely shocked and stunned, and trying to journalistically compose a life story of one man in 200 words or less was incredibly frustrating for a writer, let alone a non-writer. So I had a really very painful physical connection to the whole idea of the obituaries, not knowing how historic they were until I started regularly working for the paper. So this is why I was inspired to do this panel. and I want to just keep rotating, but I'd like to go to the visuals for a bit. And Tom, if you want to comment on these, because these are from you, before we get to the actual images, can you show us, let's jump ahead, tell us a little bit about what was the basis for the Obituary Project, which is worldwide known now. Because, hold on, one of the most frequent phone calls we got at the B.A.R. in the pre-internet age was, I have a friend, I think, who died of AIDS. Can you look up his obituary? And of course, we had no way of doing that because we didn't even have a full set of the papers. The Historical Society did, but they were downtown. So we couldn't like look through something in 1987 in October and see if their friend had died. And handing it over to Tom, what inspired you to create this renowned, now completely accessible project?
Okay. Do you want to, excuse me, do you want to start sharing my screen?
Yeah.
So can everybody see the quilt panels here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So remember I said I joined the chorus in 1985, and there were 7 people who were dead. In 1987, the first display of the Names Project quilt happened in San Francisco, in DC, and this was our chorus quilt. And the names on the waves in the water and the clouds in the sky are 30 names. So from 1985 to 1987, the chorus went from 7 to 30. And if you can, it's probably very difficult to see, but it looks as if there's muddiness on the lanes of the bridge to the left and to the right, and up and down the pillars.
Yeah.
That's because for our 30th anniversary in 2008 or 2018, I updated the quilt and added the names of the now 300 that are dead. So there's now 300 names. Getting back in sequence, so 87, the quilt, 30 names. This is a page that was published in the chorus's program for their 10th anniversary in 88, formed in 78, 10 years in 88. There's 37 names, so 7 more in the year after the quilt. Then jump forward to 1990, and sorry this is so small, but this was in the date book and the Chronicle, and this has become a very well-worn photo, if you will.
Yes.
Because I have always said that the chorus is a microcosm of the gay community as a whole. And this picture was so, it was one of those moments in time that can never be repeated. There happened to be, when this picture was taken, 115 people, 122 or 121 on the stage. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people who are facing forward. So everybody's facing backward. The 7 people who are facing forward have taken out their tuxedo jackets. And it just so happened that those 7 people were the only 7 people that had been in the chorus for the full period from 1978 to 1990. The people who've turned their backs are the 115 that were dead. So again, 1988, 37 people, 1990, 115 people. So then in 2018, the chorus recreated
it's tough. It's really,
yeah.
We're going there.
Nice. Okay, so we recreated this photo, and now there are 300 dead. And what we did was we took we didn't have quite 300 on stage here. We had about 250, but we had 7 people turn around again. And there was only one person in the chorus at this time that had been with the chorus in 1978.
Wow.
So this is a long way around explaining why I got involved in this project. So what happened was that hang on a second, I'm gonna
Bring something else up?
Yeah, I want to bring something else up. Hang on a sec.
Yeah, we get this little infinity mirror that everybody, don't worry about it. Nothing's going wrong with your computer, folks.
Okay, hang on.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a very impactful image. The recreation and the original, they're very iconic.
Yeah. Okay, give me another sec, sorry. So, oh crap. Is it now? Do you see the obituaries?
No, you have to share your screen.
I did. Oh, sorry. Wow.
There we go. Add to stream.
Now we got it?
Yeah, the website.
Yeah. Okay, so what I did was in anticipation of the chorus's 30th anniversary in 2008, at that point there were 250 dead, 225. And I started a project at the Gay Historical Society where all I was looking for was the obits of as many of the 225 that I could find. So I started scanning the papers in 1978 when the chorus was formed, and I would turn page after page after page before I found a chorus member of Obits, and issue after issue. And finally, actually, I can show you over here.
Hole in the wall.
This is where I detailed all my work of scanning. So I started in 2007 in anticipation of the 2008 anniversary, and when I got through July here, well, actually, yeah, in July of 2007, I said, every obituary I'm not scanning is somebody else's brother, father, uncle, lover, best friend, and there's going to be an awful lot of people that are looking for other names rather than just the chorus names. I planned on putting the chorus obituaries on the chorus's website.
Mm.
Well, I decided by July that was being too myopic, if you will. So I got together with a friend of mine who's a web designer, and I said, if you, this obit right here for Rick Kirkham, Rick was a friend of mine and a friend of Dan Leifker, who's the webmaster. So I said, if I scan these obits, would you create a searchable database? And he said, I'll do it. So now there are close to 15,000 files in the Obituary database.
Wow. 15,000?
Yeah.
Wow. And that's not just from the Bay Area Reporter, though, but it's mostly?
No, almost all of them. If there's probably a maximum of 20 that other people have emailed to me or something and said, can these be included? But that's very, very few, actually. And then just a little sidelight, Jim had asked me as we were preparing for this if I knew who the first AIDS death was, or AIDS reported death, shall we say,
right,
in the B.A.R. And I didn't, but then I checked my scan over here, and I found this little notice, first AIDS death notice column, and Jim and I together found this obituary for I'll just back up and show you how you find it here. So the guy's name is Shield. Okay, so I took a look on the main page of the website, searched for it. There happened to be a couple of people with that in their name. Clicked on it, and then when you click on the obituary itself, here it comes. And this was the beginning of the obituaries. The obituary, the official obituary, shall we say, in the B.A.R.
Right.
Prior to this time, there were like display ads that would be shown if somebody wanted to pay for an ad. But starting with this obituary, and then below this little gizmo here are some other notations. It says, Tom Simpson of Lambert Funeral Guild reported the deaths of Louis Jones on April 14th, 84, and Richard Falcon, April 19th of 84. Both men were memorialized at the Columbarium. So this was the beginning of the actual postings in the B.A.R.
Yeah. Yeah, you found that, and I found that page. We'll look at that in a few minutes.
Yeah.
This is a monumental task, and this is why I wanted to include you in this, Tom. It's also very easily searchable for folks who want to look people up by name. It's a lot easier than going to the Historical Society and getting a researcher's permit to go through it. But you can also research on archive.org and see the full issues of the newspaper, which we will show you some excerpts of. But thank you, Tom, for your service for that. It's really, I wish more people would do it. But there was a strange thing that I just knew that other papers were not doing this. Get LGBT, we didn't have that term.
I know.
They weren't printing obituaries on a regular basis. Nobody else was doing that, and I don't know why.
Yeah. And I had hoped that I could basically expand this nationwide. So I contacted people in Washington and Dallas to see if they were doing such similar things, and they weren't. So it's just us out here.
Huh.
I should let me share one more time, because I do want to mention the my only reward that I get out of this is when people leave guest book entries. So let's go back to that guy, Shield, Michael Shield. And you'll notice that there are a couple of guest book entries here, one by John Mehring and another by somebody that calls himself Sponge Gear. And Sponge Gear has actually left his memory on a kiosk at the Gay Historical Society Museum, where I also volunteer, because we had featured the Obit Project on a kiosk at the museum, and people started leaving random guest book entries associated to a specific person.
Right.
So Sponge Gear from Daly City just said, I came here with my BFF, Dat Boy, and we love the place. Congrats on the museum. So it didn't even have anything to do with John Mehring. But I've got to tell you, there's one more thing I want to mention before we get off of this, and that's that probably one of my favorite and most moving guest book entries, because these get emailed to me as they're entered, was a friend who said, I lost touch with you after we served in Vietnam together.
Wow, that's really painful. Yeah, the longing that people have for just knowing whether or when or how their friend or loved one or trick or, it's no judgment. They want to know. I had to write one cross country with Danny Fass when John Avino Jr., otherwise known as Jay Corbin, died. He had lived with me about the 3 months before he died, before he went home to Rhode Island to die. And we had to call each other on the phone, New York, to go, what was his real name? Was he Junior or the second? And, I have one of his old diary entries. Did he know so-and-so? And it became very personalized when you had that happen. Guy, I want to switch over to you and ask, when did the world of being a florist and doing memorials, was there a time when that started becoming frequent?
Well, it was, I guess, when I first started, it was like I would see people and then I wouldn't see people. It was like a hide and seek. Did you see Larry? Have you seen Mark? Have you, it was like we were wondering what is going on, because people were getting sick and they weren't telling people, and we couldn't find you. It was sort of like this guy who bought flowers from me. I never saw again, and I would see him every day. And, it was such a tragedy that, I thought that this catastrophe had brought us all together. We didn't know the formula, but we knew that there was strength in numbers, and we marched and we tried to help each other. It was really something. I think I got off the subject, but what exactly was your question again?
No, you're totally on target. You're on the subject. No, I just developing community out of desperation, I think, is something that there's a commonality between all our experiences. But I think a lot of people know you as the guy who sells the beautiful flowers on Noe Street. And if you don't know where Noe Street is, find it. We'll show some pictures of your bouquets later. But how that coalesced into trying to bring some beauty and some poetry to a memorial service that it maybe isn't seen in an obituary.
Well, I thought I was affected by it because I had people like Sylvester who would come by on his scooter and buy flowers, and Tracy Chapman would buy flowers, and Robin Williams' wife would buy flowers, and I felt like I was in the eye of the hurricane, because I would see so many different things that were happening that we couldn't contain. It was so difficult. I remember people coming up to me saying, "Guy, my lover died. I don't have any money. Can you help me?" And I helped everybody. There was something that I thought I could do to help someone to get to the other side, as they used to say.
Right.
It was a tragedy, and we were all holding hands. We didn't know what to do. It was prayers and quilts and sewing and singing, and we did whatever we could do.
Yeah.
Yes.
In looking through pages from the B.A.R. for specific AIDS news, I'm going to segue to Liz. I was amazed to remember and remember how long it took to even get the shitty drugs like ACT. Now, how there are these years where there was one headline after another that said, proposed cure, proposed vaccine in the future, maybe in East Bay. This is all this like forward thinking at the same time as the obituary pages got larger and larger and larger until they were 2 pages. Liz, can you talk a little bit, as I'm going to go to the slideshow, talk a little bit about your first experiences and being objective while talking about something that is killing your friends? That's something I have often struggled with.
Okay. Well, I once I got into the science of HIV, writing about the activism angle, it's very hard to be objective. It's like, I sometimes consider myself an advocacy journalist in that respect. It's like clearly, the goals of ACT UP, getting treatments available, making them affordable, making them accessible, were all things I agreed with. With the science, it's a little bit easier. It's like, you've got the data. Maybe it shows something works. Maybe it shows it doesn't work. You report it. We do see a lot in the media, and we're seeing it a lot with COVID, the idea, the whole thing of hype, there's something that like shows a promise in a laboratory, in a test tube, or maybe in a mouse or a monkey study, and it's like, oh, promising cure on the horizon. It's like, it's not on the horizon. Probably it's probably several phases of clinical trials in the future. And as we've seen with both, I think the first it was Margaret Heckler that said to expect a HIV vaccine, and I don't remember how many, it was a couple of years, and it's no real progress on HIV vaccines. And I just reported something the other day about yet another vaccine trial has failed, and it's a much harder problem than COVID for a lot of scientific reasons. But the treatments have been fabulous. It's like to go from where we were in 1987 with AZT, which didn't work that great, and it had a lot of side effects. It didn't work for very long, and then the first drug cocktails in the mid 90s. It worked, but they had side effects, and some people were taking handfuls of pills 3 times a day, and you had to arrange your food around it. And at that time, to have thought that we would go to like one pill once a day, extremely well tolerated, can keep the virus suppressed indefinitely, and in most people. Now we've got an injection, an injectable treatment that can be given once a month, and the FDA is looking at an every 2-month indication. So take a shot 6 times a year, and that keeps your HIV under control. And parallel to that, we have the 1 pill once a day to prevent HIV. So I think, if anybody had said in the late 80s that that's where we'd be now, despite the absence of a vaccine and a cure, we've really come a long way, and the advances medical advances have been remarkable.
Yeah. Wow. It is. Yeah. I was trying to rapidly the last few days screen cap as many headlines as I could from the paper, and I'm going to try to show my first images, and you guys can comment as we go, because that's pretty much how it's going to be fun to do. Let me try to share my screen, share screen, allow. Remember, select window or screen, entire screen, allow, and can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so this is you can look at the headlines and see I didn't get to pre-AIDS, that first mention of it, but this is very early, 1983. Safe sex is apparently one word, according to Paul Lorch, and lesbians get AIDS? Let's find out. A lot of this is very retro. Do parasites cause AIDS? Was that ever proven or disproven?
Parasites cause some of the opportunistic illnesses that people with AIDS are prone to. So that's probably where that connection came from. Okay, well, we have a doctor who did a Q&A, and this is an interesting, fascinating story with photos of San Francisco General Hospital of a guy named Mike who went through the whole process of looking for treatments. And I didn't get a chance to read the whole thing, but it's one of those fascinating stories that it's great that it got a 2-page spread, because it's SF General is kind of an ugly looming building in those days. Well, it still is, but the whole idea of a personal journey is something that we were starting to see more of, along with scientific. And here's another one. I'm recovering. What he's describing there is, San Francisco General Hospital had the first outpatient HIV, not known as HIV at the time, the first outpatient AIDS ward, and the first inpatient AIDS ward, Ward 5B. So that was in '83, and that was the first one in the country. And he talks a bit about his experience, visiting. If I recall correctly, he visits a friend there, and it tells a little bit about. It was a whole new model. It was people, it was volunteers, volunteer medical staff, because a lot of people didn't want to work with people with HIV. They didn't want to care for them. So it was young doctors and volunteer nurses that put this together, and it really became a model for the country.
Right. I should add that Liz knows this because she's not only our HIV reporter, but she also did a very thorough summary of the history of AIDS reporting for our 50th anniversary issue, which came out in the first week of April this year. You're welcome to go online. You can get the web article or the PDF and look up issues on the right-hand corner of B.A.R.com. was a common thing, Liz, or condoms, and you're still questioning these things even in 80s.
You know, I'm not. You know, I wasn't that familiar with the condom debate. I know that, you know, certainly in my day as an activist, you know, we were always giving out condoms and throwing condoms at people, and that was, you
Yeah.
know, that was at the time that was the only thing anybody really had any idea might work, and it did, clearly. But, you know, a lot of people had trouble using condoms consistently over a long period of time, which is why, you know, cases have continued, and why we've all along needed more prevention methods. Rather, you know, it's not a one size fits all thing. People, after condoms came the idea of serosorting, that you try to only have sex with someone of your same HIV status. And then, you know, along came PrEP, where you could take a pill to prevent HIV. So that was a trajectory that, you know, has gone throughout the pandemic. I don't know if you remember back, at one point people said lesbians needed to use dental dams.
Oh my God, dental dams, yes.
And that was proven to be, you know, women to women sex was not a way HIV was transmitted, essentially. I'm sure there were a case here or there, but that wasn't, that proved not necessary. So,
but they were fun to play with.
Things went one way sometimes, and they went the other way sometimes too. So,
yeah. So this St. Patrick's weekend issue in March 1983 has a copy. We got the rights apparently to use Larry Kramer's famous speech, 1,112 and counting, from the New York Native, which, you know, was not the best journalistic publication of its time later on, with the dolphin pig snout craze that Charles Ortleb went way overboard with the conspiracy theories. But at least they published Larry Kramer's speech, the famous speech, and then it got syndicated. Now, this brings up the thing that I forgot about too, was the whole bathhouse debate. I don't know if Tom or Guy, were you around when this was being debated?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yes, I was around.
Yeah.
And the bathhouses were almost taboo at the time. It was like, well, do you want to get AIDS? Or, you know, to me, I just stayed home and satisfied myself.
Okay.
To be honest, you know, it was like, I think this was the best way to go for me. But there were people still going to bathhouses and having unsafe sex. And, you know, there was no one to tell you you shouldn't be doing this. But, you know, we live and we learn.
Yeah.
In my case, before I moved here, so this would have been 1983 most likely, I was in a bathhouse in Washington, D.C., and had gone into a cubicle with someone, and he asked me if I would wear a condom. And I hadn't worn a condom in my entire life. And basically, I said, "What for?" And you're not going to get pregnant. And he said, "Well, there's this thing going around, and I just want to. I've heard that this helps." So that's the first time I ever heard of, you know, gay men using condoms. And then, of course, the closing of the bathhouses, which I don't know if you were going to get into it, Jim, but this was a huge rights thing. We fought for our rights to have gay sex, and now you want us to sanitize it. Was basically what people were saying.
No, quite dramatic. There were a lot of other headlines like this. I picked this one because it was the most visual, but there were a lot of debate through the whole back and forth with the health department that the paper covered. I don't know if it was Lorch or Salinas. No, he came later.
It was Lorch, and he very much took the whole, you know, AIDS is destroying our movement. It's taking away the liberation. We are hard-won liberation, and that was very much his take on the coverage until he stopped. He ceased being editor, around the time the bathhouse debates were coming to a head. And I don't know whether that had something to do with it or not.
That's a whole nother 1 hour chat that we, yeah. Well, you can see he's writing the one below the fold about quarantines. That's Paul's article as well. So it's hard. I mean, now we move to an AIDS virus test in quotes, meaning they don't know if it's actually a virus, or they're still, the paper's editorial focus seems to still be questioning even defining it as a virus in 1984 because it hadn't been specifically defined as such.
Right.
If I can, let me just mention, in case you skip over it, this quarantine thing. Yeah. They were talking about reopening the Japanese internment camps from 1945,
right?
And putting all the gay people in the Japanese internment camps. Can you believe it? I mean, yes. Think of that. You can believe it because it happened, and it happened to them, and it could have happened to us. Yep.
If one more right-wing senator in California, and it would have happened all over. But this goes into the virus, AIDS virus, still in quotes. That just kind of piqued my interest. It's like, did they decide that they didn't know if it's an AIDS virus, or did they not believe it was an AIDS virus?
Right, and the virus was identified, I believe it was 1985. It could have been 1984. And as you probably, you might recall, there's a controversy. The French researchers discovered one virus, and
Gallo
researchers in New York or in the U.S. And it turned out that they had discovered the same thing, and there was a debate over who discovered it first,
or who stole it from the French.
Right. That became, they agreed on HIV as a name, and soon thereafter, it was able to test for HIV. Before there was a test for the virus, they tested your CD4 cells, and if they were, dropping, you had this thing that wasn't well defined. But that was before the actual virus had been identified, and a test for that was developed.
Right. Okay. So more bathhouse coverage. This I like because this is one of the early obituary columns where there's more than one. This is 1984 in October. There are 5 obituaries, one with a photo. And then there started to become more AIDS coverage in 84. This is obviously, some of us remember living through this. People who, funeral directors refuse to touch their bodies. They refuse to bury them the way they want. The family and the partners and the chosen family argue over the last wishes of the deceased. As funeral service ads started to accrue on other sides. This is a.
Let me mention something. The Sullivan Funeral Home on Market Street is now becoming condos, but it was the Sullivan Funeral Home was one of the first places that was burying gay people and having. Was embalming gay people, and it was a privately run, family-run funeral home, and it was people don't remember this, or they don't know this. I mean, you couldn't get embalmed. Right. It was that bad. You could not get a body embalmed at a regular funeral home. Thank God for Sullivan's.
Yeah. Now, I should add that Sullivan's in the photo on the bottom right is not the same as the one in the headline on the left. It's two different funeral homes that are being discussed there. Yeah, but there were a lot of unpermitted or unrequested cremations that were done quickly and abruptly in those days. So more about the baths and more about the baths. Steam room shut. The question is why? In the meantime, finally some money for AIDS care education. That's interesting. And here's one of the early AIDS rides. I think before. No, it's the foundation related. That's a whole nother story too. We won't go into that. Here's another obituary page that I thought was interesting, just that it was expanding. More photos. There's a woman of color, or no, is it Asian? Mark Yim, and also more national coverage. This is Bay Area, San Mateo. The antibody test is mentioned here. We're in 1985 by then. And everyone remembers, or some of us remember, the protesters at the Federal Building, the AIDS vigil, where they had the permanent sit-in. Weeks, or was it months?
10 years. 10 years.
Wow. Yeah, and it's thought to be the first sort of the first protest by people with HIV and ARC, it was the AIDS ARC Vigil, which was AIDS-related complex. And it's thought to be the first one. I know ACT UP New York often gets credit. They started in March 1987.
Right.
But, things were happening here in terms of activism before that, a couple years before that. And as Tom said, that ran until, 10 years.
Wow.
I also want to mention, put in a plug for the Gay History Museum, because we do have a section devoted to those early years, and there's a lot of coverage about the AIDS ARC Vigil, the people locking themselves to the federal building.
I'm fascinated by the multiple angles of AIDS coverage here that we have. You have the protesters, you have a bill, you have a bathhouse battle, and the layout is clean and it's iconic. I'm just fascinated by it. And then you have this ad from the San Francisco AIDS Foundation, which is quite questionable, I would say, but also they're trying to make a point. I understand. But there are a lot of other ads that are very kind of shaming. We'll get back to that in a minute. What was the point of this one? Oh, Rock Hudson.
Hudson revealed he had AIDS, yeah.
Yeah, this is a year and summary headline, but it just to note the timeline. And the AIDS Vigil is being trying to influence them to close. And here a guy was fired from Neiman Marcus for having AIDS, which was, we forget how many people lost their jobs as they were sick.
Oh,
Yep.
yes. Oh, yes.
Just so much of that going on. And here's another expanded obituary page.
Yeah.
In 1986, 1987, Liberace dies of AIDS. What I'm not showing here is a profundity of fitness ads and fitness columns and sports that were trying to counter sickness and AIDS. But also there was so much arts coverage of AIDS related. Tom, you have some stuff that we'll show in your slideshow folder. There's coverage of it elsewhere, but there were so many other things going on at the same time. That was pretty much amazing when things like this quarantine plan make a headline at the same time as people were just trying to get basic civil rights. Mandatory AIDS tests. This is pretty panic-stricken cover here, just in time for Valentine's Day. Now, Liz, you wanted me to mention this one.
It's the first approval of the first HIV medication, AZT, in 1987, which, as somebody mentioned, that was after years of trying various things that didn't work, and AZT did control viral replication, but it didn't work on its own. So, within months or years, the virus came back, and it wasn't until there was combination treatment that people were able to keep it under control long term.
AZT was awful. I was on AZT, the whole 4-hour regime, and your timers. You had pill cases with timers on it. You'd go to a movie or a concert, and you'd hear these little beeps go off in the middle of a concert because people had to take their drugs. It was just unbelievable.
Wow.
And I don't think AIDS ever kept anybody alive. AZT.
No.
I think it bought people time until there was better treatments. But on its own, it left a lot to be desired.
No, all the people I knew who were on it died, but they died of other, who knows what. But they hated it. It nearly killed them, or it killed them. David B. Feinberg, Tom Cunningham. I could just go on with the guys in New York. And over in the corner, gay protest hits Wall Street. I love how that's just like 100 words when that was what got me into ACT UP and being such.
Yeah, that was ACT UP's first protest, and it barely made a dent here, right? They don't even mention it's ACT UP. They call it like the Lavender Hill or something else.
Well, it was a kind of pre-ACT UP-y thing, but whatever. Mm-hmm. Along with the Golden Gate Bridge being celebrated, city hikes budget to $17 million for AIDS, which of course is a drop in the bucket. Speaking of drops in the bucket, there's Mr. Dukakis. There's a 2-page spread of all kinds of stuff. Charts, corporate policies, fraud in AIDS fundraising, ads. It's kind of overwhelming. And here's another large page full of obituaries. In 1987, Reagan. I think that's the only point. And here's an ad that kind of struck my eye. This is what I was talking about, the whole illusion of fitness, that to defy AIDS is to be muscular, to go to the gym. It kind of sets up I don't know. I don't know. I question this ad. The guy's hot, but again, it's another misfiring ad from the AIDS Foundation, of which there were.
And that whole debate was like, if there's no treatments anyway, and knowing you're HIV positive could get you, arrested, fired, or arrested for, transmission or criminalized, why test? It's not going to do you any good. So that was the debate at the time.
Wow. Yeah. It's hard to remember those days when that was. Okay. AIDS Vigil gets arrested. The quilt comes into existence and has a big, not premiere in Washington.
Yeah, that was the first display.
The first full display.
First display of the whole thing, right?
Okay, because it's so much larger now, but in those days, the PWA is being described as handicapped, so getting disability. This is something in '88 that I wanted to highlight, not just the hot guy on the left.
Yeah, I've got a comment about that. Excuse me. Another chorus related story. So the antibody, or the threshold for going on disability because of your T cell count was 300. If you fell below 300, you could claim you're disabled. You could go out on disability. So there was a humpy guy, kind of like the guy in the picture in the chorus, who was preparing for I believe it's the second Gay Games.
Oh, yeah.
96, I think it was.
96.
Robert Wynant, his name was. Humpy, probably about a 5'4", just rippled muscles. And he went out, he worked for AT&T, and he went out on disability and then practiced shot put and won a gold medal at the Gay Games in 86 or 87, whatever they were.
1986.
And I got this gold medal. And I was mad. My T cells were under 300. And I felt fine. He felt fine. I felt he took advantage of this loophole or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. So I was mad. I was mad at him. And he got this gold medal, and 2 weeks later he was dead.
Mm.
He lived for that competition. He forced himself to live and to thrive and to get that medal. And I never forgave myself for giving him a hard time. He knew it was right for him to go out on disability. It wasn't right for me, but it was right for him. So from that point forward, I stopped judging how other people took care of their diagnosis.
Right. Sure. Yeah. No, and of course, that was what the Gay Games was about. It was about inclusion. You don't have to, win. You don't have to be a star athlete. It's about participation. That was probably a highlight for him.
Oh, absolutely.
Guy, you mentioned Sylvester. Here's the first headline Alan White wrote in 1988, the departure of the great Sylvester in December.
Yeah, what I didn't catch that question again.
No question. Just you referenced Sylvester, that you knew him, of course, and here's made the front page, not just any obituary, because Sylvester was so outstanding.
Yeah, he was incredible. He was world famous. I remember that they turned on the lights in Paris at the Eiffel Tower in memory of Sylvester. And
wow.
It was just amazing because he would come by my flower stand and we would just shoot the breeze and he would buy flowers and then the next time I think I saw him, he was in a wheelchair at the parade, at the gay parade, and I was devastated. All I can say is that we've come a long way. We came from these cocktails to today, just B.A.R, just one pill, and we've made a lot of progress, and it's hurtful even just to think about what has happened, but you know, we learn from the history. You
Yeah.
know, we do the best we can.
Yeah, one of this got, I think this is more 1989, later talking about controversies over fundraising, over the salaries of people in the AIDS nonprofits that are clashing with activists. And here's Pat Christen, just as an example, that people started not accepting that everyone did have their best intentions at heart, because a lot of people were taking in a lot of money. And this is what I really was attracted to the B.A.R. and why I stuck with them, is that they're not just regurgitating press releases from nonprofits. They're questioning the money that's raised and where it's going. Here's another 2-page spread of just lots of diverse ACT UP coverage from different writers. Again, another good thing about a newspaper is having different writers with different perspectives. Just grabbed another obituary page from 1989. And here's another questionable ad from the San Francisco AIDS Foundation. I'll just move on. ACT UP. This is ACT UP. I didn't go into all the visuals of the split between ACT UP Golden Gate and San Francisco because I don't care. But it was
it hasn't happened yet.
Right. Okay. I didn't get every year in, so we're gonna have to save that for the sequel. But this is interesting just because issues of HIV with women were covered in the paper by a male writer, but I just wanted to note that it had taken place because it was very rare that it happened.
Jim, I don't know. Go back that one, please. I don't know if you've got another picture of the front page with the index. So you see the index?
Oh yeah, it's on the left. Yeah.
Do you have another page?
No, I don't have the whole page. No.
Okay, so people need to know how bad it was in those years. Thursday when the B.A.R. would come out, people would be gathered at the newsstands,
right,
wherever the B.A.R. was given out, and they were looking at the front page of the paper to see where the obits were, right. And they were just opening the paper right to that page. Because like Guy was saying, if you didn't see somebody for a week or two, you better look in the obits, because right. They were people that were dying that fast. Right. And we were all standing at these newsstands looking for our friends, going up and down the paper. You know, is there anybody here I know? It was awful.
Yeah. No, that's just how valuable the paper is. Even though it was free, it's always been free. Yeah. Nobody else was doing this. Nobody else was collecting these things and finding a photo. And anyway, here's convicted ACT UP protesters tell police brutality. No surprise. And the dance-a-thon raised $125,000. Here's a 2-page spread of obituaries that you were mentioning. And an AZT ad. I think I knew 2 of the guys on this page from New York. Hard to tell. More AZT. Drug. Is this one of the ones you want? Oh, I just wanted to note how you see how we're using UPI, and also there's an AIDS briefs column. This is an early version of it. That would become a mainstay for years because there was so much HIV news. It had to be condensed into multiple news releases.
And also, over time, it's like at some periods there were people on the either writing or editorial staff that were really into the science of AIDS and wrote about it, and then there was long stretches when there wasn't really anybody that had that angle, so ran AP and stuff. There were a couple of people before that were real science wonks and wrote about that, and then later, of course, there was the ACT UP Golden Gate writers pool that wrote a lot. So I think a lot of my as I went through it, my read was, depending on whether or not they happened to have someone who could write about HIV science at the time, was whether or not they featured it or not.
And if they could pay them, because they pay them anything. This obituary spread, along with the news about a dentist abusing nitrous oxide, is quite touching for me because of the David Stern featured obituary. That someone remembered to use a photo of him outing himself as a person with AIDS, protesting, and had probably, died only months after this photo was taken. Very touching and realistic. Money for AIDS, blah, 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 AIDS testing. Oh, and let's talk about Michael Botkin, because I got to meet him the first few years of my employment at the B.A.R. He would bring in his column on a little flat disc, and then we would pair it with his little cartoon and scan it on a photostat machine. He was a very opinionated and snarky and basically documented his demise through his column over the course of a few years. Is that right, Liz?
It's before my time, largely before my time, but yeah, that's my understanding. Having gone through it, it's like he's generally writing about his experience, and he did so, right up until he was really ill.
And also a contributor and co-creator of Disease Pariah News, a very outrageous zine in the day that was owning HIV by the writers. I love the whole he's talking about the ACT UP type. He's making fun of activists who were posers. God forbid there should be any of those. I dated quite a few. Here's ACT UP crashes Bush's party. Now, this is 1992? I think I got the date right. There's also a visual of the quilt.
Is that in Kennebunkport?
That is not. No.
Oh, okay.
Bush.
Well, Bush had a compound up there, so.
Yes, I attended that. I have lovely colorful.
A lot of us did, yeah.
But this is a San Francisco when
George
Bush came to the St. Francis Hotel, or as the gays like to call it, the Connie Francis Hotel. But again, this is another combination AIDS-themed cover that I just wanted to share because it had, and then this is the famous time when Bush flew his helicopter over the quilt. Is that right, I think? There was a large protest as well as a quilt display. And here's another Michael Botkin column with a little cartoon. And he's making fun of an AIDS careerist who some of us may have met or known. I won't name names, but he really got to the point. He really, you have to look this up. Just look up Michael C. Botkin on the archives and read some of his columns. Here's another 2-page spread of obituaries. Yet another one, 1992 in July. This is when I was editing these, so I pretty much edited all these. And then we'd have to size the photo, brighten it up a little bit, hope that they didn't include their cat or a hat or sunglasses, as this one guy here wore sunglasses. We started accepting paid obituaries. That's like Dennis Lynn Kirshner over on the right. Either was a prominent person who gets a news obituary, or their friends and survivors decide to pay for a bigger feature. Drugs, just talking about drugs there in a nice visual. Now, Liz, I think you wanted me to mention this issue because of something. October 1994.
Doesn't look familiar.
I didn't. Maybe I got the. Oh, well, here we are.
No bits. Oh, there was one in 1996 I wanted you to show, but
I'll get to that one. Tom, can you give us a little insight into what you have discovered about the famous No Obits cover?
Yes.
Let's go out of picture and let's take a break to that and go to. I'll remove the screen and give us a little chit chat. We're gonna go to 7:30 because this is. I knew this would take more than an hour. So go ahead.
Okay, let me find it here.
Okay. You don't have to show it on the screen. You just talk.
Actually, hang on a sec.
Trying to see where I am on the. No, I only have 2 more pictures, so I'm going to cut that.
Okay, am I broadcasting?
Yeah, let me show your screen. You want to see your screen? There, let's add your screen. There we go.
So we've got I can't see my screen. You guys.
We got the AIDS deaths. We got the multiple photo pages.
So this, I am, since I'm the keeper of the records of the Obits, this is something that I have sent all over the world to people who are researching the human impact of AIDS. So there was a period. Jim has been talking about two pages of obits or something. What the B.A.R. did was they took 8 solid pages of a 12-month period. Now, not every obit had a picture. So these are only the obits with pictures for a 12-month period. It's down here at the bottom. So this, if nothing else, it's kind of like those pictures of the chorus with their backs turned. this is hard to take, you know?
Yes,
This
it
is
is.
really hard to take. And this is from October of 88 to November of 89. So a 12-month period, these 8 people, these 8 pages worth of photos filled the pages of the B.A.R. Another thing that I can stop sharing now, but another thing that keeps coming up in my research, you know what? I've lost my thought. Happens at my age. It'll come back to me.
No obits.
Oh, the no obits shit. Oh, God. All right, here we go. Let's try it again. All right. So Jim asked me earlier today about the first AIDS death. And I mentioned to him that when I was doing my scanning, and just to let you know, this has been a long-term project. This is.
You want to show the screen? You want to see that?
Oh, am I not?
I am. I'm controlling it. Go ahead.
Oh,
we're looking at your chart now. Yeah,
all right. So what I was going to show you. Oh, hold on. No, I'm not. No, I'm not in the right place. One moment, please.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So just to show you that this has been a long-term labor of love, these are all my work days. So these are the days that I have spent scanning obituaries. But I found a lot of things, a lot of facts and a lot of errors, and one of them is this. The first issue of the B.A.R. with no obituaries was really October 30th of 1997.
Oops.
The one with the big headline was August 13th of 98. So it was almost 10 months before that there really were no obits. Okay, I'm done now.
No, it's really fascinating because that got so much coverage, and the anniversary got so much coverage.
Yeah.
And then James J. Siegel did a poem about it that got all this coverage. And I'm always suspicious of, certain historical revisionism that restates thing. And I won't go into specifics, but we're going to the no obits thing. And I don't even think you need to see it. You can look it up. It's online. But that is satisfying and disturbing at the same time. That all it took was a five, your months of research to discover they kind of fudged it. So I'm just fascinated by that. I want to show more data, more visual data that Tom put together, and you guys can comment on that as well. And then we're going to close out with some lovely. Maybe we'll do some more chatting, but I have miscellaneous AIDS facts that I'm going to open and share, and we can discuss these as well. I think, Liz, you'd be able to get a quick look. Okay, so there, that, and I will go to add to screen. Sorry. So that's the first AIDS death notice that we mentioned before, that you guys visualized before. That's very touching. And there's a little close-up that you already showed that. This is 1984, 33 AIDS cases in June.
Yeah.
And this a spin-off of the famous New York Times article, or?
No, this is just one of those fun facts to know and tell your friends. But but this is important. This is 84, and this is when the B.A.R. first officially noted that they would publish free obituaries with a photo, 200-word obituaries with a photo.
Right.
And as I don't know, Jim, did you mention this in this chat, or was this offline between the two of us about the fact that nobody else was doing this? I guess it was during this chat.
There were celebrity obituaries in Frontiers and the Sentinel and the Advocate, but not regular folks. And if they got their bodies shipped home to Iowa or whatever, they were not admitting they died of AIDS.
Yeah.
Right before I moved here, a high school friend died of AIDS, and the local newspaper did not even say that a cause of death. They didn't even lie. They didn't even bother. Everyone knew it was AIDS. Conwell died of AIDS. And all my high school friends were like, well, that's why we didn't invite you to speak at the funeral, because we knew you'd be upset. And I was like, you're right. You're fucking right. I would be. Anyway, this is important, yes, because when we moved our offices from the Ninth Street office to elsewhere and now here, I think we donated boxes full of the handwritten obituaries that were still being stored. Over the years, I think the Historical Society has many original handwritten obituaries with photos, either in envelopes or paper clipped, but we couldn't keep them all. There were boxes and boxes of them, and they were not thrown out. Most of them were not thrown out. That was something that none of us that I knew could dispose of. But anyway, here's another image.
And this is the San Francisco Department of Health has, throughout they have really kept track of new cases, age-related deaths, and they've been very good about making that data available to the public. You can go on their website and see there. At the time there wasn't a website, but they have done a good job of keeping the picture of the epidemic something that everybody could keep track of.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
but just before you move on, just note those numbers. San Francisco has 1,000 AIDS deaths in 1984. 1,000. Now it's hundreds of thousands.
And just to put that in perspective, that this is, I don't see the date on that. It says March 18th, but I don't know what year. But
4/11/85.
4/11/85. That's 1 month, and in the most recent epidemiology report, there were 166 new diagnoses in all of 2019.
Wow.
So almost as half as many in a month as we have in a year now.
Yeah. Here's some early arts coverage of the handsome Aidan Quinn bravely portraying a gay man who gets AIDS in the early TV movie, 1985, and early Frost. Quite a groundbreaking piece of cinema. Still got to credit the guy for doing that and the whole team who developed it. It ages well compared to other films that tried to take it on. Longtime Companion is another classic that was very well covered in the paper. Okay, back to statistics.
Yeah.
July 85, 54 AIDS cases for June. Graph. This is all from the B.A.R, right?
Yep.
So you can tell by the fonts. I'm just trying to.
What we saw is gay men, adopted safer sex practices really in the early 80s, and that was reflected in a decrease in new cases, even as early as the early 80s, when they started to go down dramatically, but the deaths kept going up because, as people that get HIV, it takes a long time to develop AIDS. So the number of new cases hit a plateau and then started to drop while the number of deaths were still going up steeply.
Yeah, I mean, the 90s were still up until the Go ahead, Guy.
It was very difficult for minorities to come out of the closet, and it was very difficult at that time because there were minorities getting AIDS, and their families were in denial of them even being gay. And it was very difficult for someone to say I need some help because something's not right now, and they didn't want to go through saying that they were gay,
right?
So that was a big challenge because the only reason sort of San Francisco was on the map is because you could be yourself, and so a lot of people came here just because they were ostracized where they lived, and they could come here and live and be free. And then, we had this terrible thing come to the table of AIDS, and it was like a taboo, you didn't I remember even in my family, I had a cousin who passed away, and zip was the lip. You never talked about why he died.
Yeah, Liz, you might have run across this in your research about the AIDS ward at San Francisco General, but both in the Obits and in other anecdotal things that I've run across in all of my work, there are obits in the database that were put in by the nurses at Ward 5B. These were obits from people quite often who got on a bus in Podunk, Arizona, or bumfuck Egypt, got to San Francisco by hook or crook. They walked or took a taxi from the airport directly to SF General. They didn't know a soul in town. They got to the hospital. They lasted a week and they died.
Wow.
Yes.
And the nurses would put in a picture and a 2 or 3 line thing, giving the guy's hometown or something. I mean, those are the rough ones. Those are the ones that Guy's talking about. The people there wasn't hope in very many places in the country in those years.
Right.
So at least it was Harvey Milk. You got to give them hope. We were doing things. We had a budget. The city was behind us. We were fighting AIDS. We were doing protests. We had the AIDS Arc Vigil. This stuff is making the news, and people are saying, "Well, I'm not getting any help here in the middle of nowhere. Let me get myself to San Francisco."
Yeah, that was a pattern. I'm wondering that, like what you said, Guy, about the double closet of being gay and having HIV for men of color, that there was a dearth of obituaries because they didn't come out, even posthumously. Their friends didn't think that they wanted to be outed as having died of AIDS or even having died. Is that a reason you think why most of the ones during my era when I was editing were white gay men who died?
I didn't get the last part of that.
Just that, do you think the double closet of being on the down low prevented anyone from writing obituaries for men of color?
Oh, definitely. Being gay has always been a taboo. Even kings and queens were gay, and some of them were killed because of it. And and now it's still a touchy subject, in minorities. I see women who leave home because, their views are different from their parents, and their parents don't want, anything to do with them. And, my heart bleeds for this,
Yeah, it's quite
I don't know how one can reconcile, just being gay is good,
It's hard. It's really difficult. I was very lucky to have incredibly supportive parents who, up until the end, supported and loved. I would send copies of the paper to them when I wrote a feature article. Liz, you wanted to show I'm going to show off one other headline.
It's just, a lot of people, like at least in the medical aspect of HIV, consider like this is from the 1996 Vancouver conference, which is when it really the first protease inhibitor was developed or approved rather at the tail end of 95, but 96 is when it kind of made the news that it was presented at a conference, and it made the mainstream media that finally we're seeing some combination treatments that can keep HIV under control. It's also my first article from the B.A.R. So it's the one I sent to Salinas unsolicited, but mentioning the no obits, it's like very soon after the new drugs became available in 96, the death rate started going down. So it doesn't surprise me that the first no obits actually happened a year earlier, because it was 1997 is really when we really started to see a dramatic decline.
Yeah.
And after that there was some shift in the advocacy and the activism. A lot of people thought like we don't have to think so much about HIV anymore now that we have good treatments. But these treatments weren't available to people in other countries. So a lot of the advocacy did shift. By the 2000 AIDS conference, which was in Durban, South Africa, there was a lot of activism focused on, we have great drugs now, let's get them to the rest of the world. And interestingly, some of those, those very same activists are now working to get COVID vaccines to the rest of the world. Lest people forget, since we have access here, that's not a privilege everyone has.
Right. Yeah. And I want to do a throwback to Tom. You can see that the index on the front page not only has an act up, but it has the obituaries. It has other things too. I think that's really cute. This was all designed by Adriana Roberts, famed DJ of the Mashup, the creator of the Mashup, and could throw together a newspaper, a whole section like that in about 2 hours. So cheers to remembering. Our current staff does an excellent job, but Adriana could just that's the redesign that she did in the 90s that led to that look, that very specific look. And speaking of looks, we can talk more, but I have to show the lovely photos that Guy sent me of his various flowers that are available, often for sale on Noe. Let me go back to my screen and add show the pretty. You got to show the pretty. You have your stuff stored in the garage there where your sign is?
No, it's right on the sidewalk. Right on the sidewalk. I used to have the garage for 8 years, and then when they turned the building that I sell flowers in front of from rentals into condominiums, to condoms. Until condos, they took the garage back,
okay.
And I had to learn how to go on, because there was a little lady up the street who told me, you know what, that garage doesn't define who you are. People like you because of those flowers. And if you want to keep selling those flowers, I would say do it, because the garage, and even I used to live 4 doors from where I sell flowers, and they turned the building into $1 million condos, which I just didn't have $1 million to purchase my apartment. But, I just believe that where there's a will, there's a way.
Right.
As a matter of fact, these people had seen the documentary We Were Here by David Weissman. And they're from New York, and they wanted to come down because they were so moved by his documentary and the messages that were opened up in that documentary about AIDS.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing film. I watched it at the theater and bawled my eyes out with Connie Champagne. She said, "Jim, I got to sit with you because I'm gonna cry." And I brought tissues. So this is a lovely bouquet of tulips. Is it tulips and crocuses, or I'm sorry, I'm not good.
They're tulips.
Okay.
Tulips.
The last one I bought from you was a bouquet that it was just like the yellow bouquet there. It lasted 2 weeks. I mean, it filled up my whole kitchen.
I seem to have a reputation for selling very good flowers at low prices.
I thought they were going to just fade the next day, and they just stayed alive the whole time. There's a lovely arrangement. That's very feng shui. I love that. Oh my God, that's very pretty. Now, what are those? What are those Snapdragon? No, they're not. What are those? The exotic ones. They look like parrot.
Ginger.
Really?
Ginger and red berries.
Okay. Well, that's lovely. I'm going to hurry up and hide that so that we don't get them into effect. Those are really good. Thanks for sharing those. And what do you think about, so those kids who came to visit with you, Guy, because of the film, do you think there's hope for the future of health advocates, of activists. I'm asking all three of you, with this history is being forgotten or is it being remembered? I don't know.
I
Well,
think
as you know, that there was just an 40th anniversary of the first reports of AIDS, and that's got a lot of coverage. I think that reminded people, and especially in the context of COVID, people can see the parallels, the same disparities of certain communities getting HIV or getting HIV are the same communities in large respect that are most affected by COVID. Inequality in access to treatment and vaccines. And I think, underlying all of that is just the need for universal health care that will cover everything. It's kind of doing everything on a disease by disease basis. Very effective in some ways, but, it left a lot of gaps as well.
Yeah, the one meme that I approve or shared was, we're not going back to the way it was. We can't, because we proved that that's not working.
Right.
I wanted to piggyback on something Guy said and something Liz said. So, can you share my screen?
Yeah, sure.
Jen?
To the quilt. There you go.
Yeah. I don't know how well you can see this, but this wave right here just has a first name. It just says Gerald, and that basically is a pay-on to what Guy was saying. He happened to be a person of color, and his parents didn't approve of anything. They didn't approve of his being gay. They didn't approve of, obviously, of him having AIDS, and they certainly didn't want his name on the quilt. And we were putting everybody's name on the quilt, so we just took it upon ourselves. He never had his last name put in the programs when he was singing. He was just had his first name. So there's definitely this stigma that we were dealing with. And then to piggyback on something Liz was saying earlier, as you can easily tell, my life revolves around the chorus. And probably you were talking about the cocktail coming around in 97. By about 99 or so, the chorus was rehearsing at Mission High School, and we were going out on a break, and I was walking down the corridor to get to the snacks that we had at break, and I heard maybe 3 millennials in a little group chatting. I didn't know these guys, and we had been, I think, talking about the 5th section, which is the list of chorus members who have died. And it had been discussed in rehearsal or in announcements or something. So these guys weren't denigrating that at all, but they were saying, "Gosh, these guys are really hung up on these people that died of AIDS," and they said, "I don't even think I know anybody who's HIV positive." And the other 2 were saying, "No, I don't think I do either." So I very politely walked up to them. I said, "Hey guys, I'm Tom Burtch. I'm an old fart. I've been around a long time, and I'm HIV positive." And that's the whole purpose of what we're doing here today. Is the Obituary Project, the chorus, what we're all talking about here, is trying to make sure that this history doesn't get. There's not Holocaust deniers. That there's not AIDS deniers, that these stories continue to be told. And again, doing a little flip back to that comment I made about people need to leave guest book entries on the obituary website. It's those memories that keep these people alive,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's very sweet and very true. Yeah. No, we try to, as a journalist, as a fiction writer, as a photographer, as a as a florist, we're trying to create a sense of people that are maybe not there, not with us. But I'm not a spiritual person. That's why I like to, write things down, something tangible. Maybe they're all flying around now saying hello, but for you to come out to those kids is so important, because you are the, connecting to the legacy of the people that we unfortunately are going to have lost but also we lose their memories, and we do our best not to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else have a comment, a closing comment? Do we get to all the good stuff and the sad stuff?
Not really. That was a good wrap up.
Yeah, there was. I should just, as Tim would do, Dr. Tim. I was a chorus kid all through school as well. Thank you, all three of you. Thank you, Liz, Tom, and Guy, for participating in this chat. I know we had multimedia off camera, backstage, technical, etc., as we always do, but that always makes it so much more fun. And thanks for sharing. And if you haven't before, here we have our first comment. Bill Mannion, thank you all for tonight's discussion. Tom's comment about the importance of not forgetting and informing younger generations is the essence of why these talks are important. Thank you. Thank you so much, Bill. I appreciate that. If you haven't, please subscribe to the Bay Area Reporters YouTube channel. We do not send you a bunch of annoying notifications. We just post a video once a month or so. That's all it is. And playlists. I'll be adding to the playlists of queer music that we like, things like that. Again, thank you all for participating, and have a really relaxing, memory-filled night.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks for including us.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to end the broadcast now. Thank you.